Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the Machine Learning Integrity Conference. My name is Kojin, co-founder at Robust Intelligence, and I'll be the host for this panel on financial services. I hope you've been enjoying all the talks and panels and lightning talks so far. This will be focused on financial services, and we have amazing industry leaders from different parts of the organization in data science, model risk management, and compliance. Financial services has been at the forefront of adopting AI in domains including fraud detection, credit scoring, algorithmic trading, and many, many others. These innovations are leading to better outcomes for businesses and customers, but deploying AI in critical decision making in a highly regulated space means that financial services must balance AI risk with innovation, hence the need for ML integrity. In this panel, we'll hear from 6 fantastic industry leaders in the space with experience developing and managing models with positive impact and integrity. With that, I'd love to start out with a quick round of intros. So to all panelists, would you be able to quickly introduce yourself and briefly tell us where you are using machine learning in your company today? Let's start from G, and we can go in the order of the videos.
Hello, everyone. This is Jay Chen from Corporate Model Risk Management from Wells Fargo. I'm the head of decision science and artificial intelligence model validation. So in Wells Fargo, we use the machine learning in multiple areas, including fraud, marketing, credit scoring, loss forecasting, capital market, and a lot of NLP areas like complaints, sentiment analysis.
Hi, this is Raj Sasteva. I head the model governance team at Northern Trust. We have, like others, have seen increased use of machine learning models at our institution in the last couple of years. Majority of those use cases are centered around improving the operational efficiencies. And so far, we haven't seen anything in credit origination, which we are happy about so far. I am the risk guy, so don't be surprised me saying that. Thank you.
Amit, go ahead.
Hi, Amit Moran, VP Data for Bluevine. We use machine learning everywhere. Majority of cases are around credit approvals and fraud detection.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Elliott Starr. I'm the Director of Data Science and Machine Learning for Chime Financial. And we use machine learning not only in our financial aspects of our products, including risk and fraud management, but also across the core suite of our products, including personalization and operational experience.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Karan. I'm a partner with Deloitte. I also lead our trustworthy AI or responsible AI services for Deloitte. Where I see a lot of my clients use AI is, in addition to what G, Raj, and Amit and Elliott shared around credit and fraud, is also around HR and talent decisions these days as well. And it's been a hot topic with some of the regulations that's coming down the pike with City of New York as well.
Hi, everybody. Özge Lolu from CIBC. I have to say, though, I don't know if it's just me having technical issues right now, but I'm hearing a double sound. I'm hearing Oz right now while I'm speaking, so I might have to rejoin or refresh. It's super confusing in my head right now. Apologies, I can't even do the introduction. But I'll try. Özge Lolu, Vice President, Advanced Analytics and AI at CIBC. I'm running the enterprise team. And the most applications of machine learning that I see within our bank is changes from the client-facing applications from wealth management to retail to fraud management, risk areas, operations, contact centers, so many better parts of our business. And I apologize, I have to drop off and come back because this is super confusing. Sorry.
No worries. And yeah, thank you for the intros and sharing about your AI applications. It sounds like it's a very wide range from NLP, credit fraud, personalization, HR, talent, retail. That's it's probably the most kind of diverse panelists in terms of the places where we're applying machine learning models today. Which actually leads to kind of a follow-up question that I had, which is that you're using machine learning models in various domains, and I'm sure you're doing that because there are a lot of benefits to machine learning models, but it's also no secret that ML models have risks. So the question is, in your organization today, where do you see the risks of AI models the most? Let's, Ozge, are you good?
Yes,
With
I am back. Yes.
Then maybe let's go in the reverse direction. Ozge, where do you see AI risk the most in your organization today?
Well, the level of AI risk is very use case dependent, in my opinion, right? So it can appear anywhere and everywhere, realistically. But how we see the AI risk is really the impact of the outcomes, machine learning outcomes on stakeholders, on our stakeholders, and multiplied by the probability of that impact happening, right? So as I said, it can happen in any use case, but typically, or I guess the more expected high impact use cases are most likely in probably credit education, fraud use cases that we would be building in fraud analytics type use cases, and probably anti-money laundering, I would say. But it doesn't mean the others are not risk-free.
Got it. And what kind of risks are you seeing the most with credit and fraud, for example?
Well, there might be many, right? Like it might be from the bias perspective. Are we being biased towards any group, individuals? You also want to be distributing the opportunities fairly as well, right? So it's not just bias with the fairness at the same time. We just want to make sure that everyone has the equal reach to our services. Those are probably the top on mine. And of course, you don't want to miss the bad actors,
Right.
because that would also have a big impact on our business and potentially on our clients directly.
Got it. Thank you. So you want to go next? What you've seen with other companies, your customers, when it comes to AI risk?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So very similar to what Ozge shared, right? So if you kind of think about what could go wrong with the AI models, I think a lot of the focus that we are seeing around the reliability of the model, whether confirming that the AI model have the ability to learn from humans as well as other systems to produce that consistent and reliable outputs. The sort of reliability risk is very apparent and very real. And the other one that I will probably add on there is the transparency and explainability. We often see our clients develop models where they are not able to, the developers or the data scientists are really not able to articulate the how the model is making decisions, what are the algorithms or attributes and correlations that may be open to inspection, and how do you explain the objective and the value proposition of the model as well. And then it probably goes without saying, but and I think Ozge mentioned this as well. How do you prevent the bad actors? How do you make sure that the model is safe and secure? So the security risks. How do you protect the model from potentially cyber risks or any type of a physical or digital harm that the model may cause? Are very, very top of mind for my clients as they think about their models.
Thank you, Elliott.
Yeah, I think in addition to what Ozge and Oz had mentioned, when you're thinking about running any kind of model that directly impacts a consumer's experience, whether they're an app user or a website user or anything, those can fail in some pretty funky ways that you wouldn't necessarily know about. Like if your model's not returning a result, everybody's going to be aware of that. But if you have a personalization system or a recommender system that's returning some weird stuff, your QA team might not catch that. Your product managers might not catch that. If you're using it as an individual user, you may not catch that. And that's kind of dangerous because that thing could go haywire. You could start recommending products to folks that you don't want to be recommending. You could start unlocking screens you don't want to be unlocking. And being able to have good monitoring and observability on that represents a really existential risk anytime you're deploying something that is as black magic-y as an ML model can be to most of the non-ML consumers in a company.
I think that's a great point. We actually, at Robust Intelligence, we call these errors silent errors because it's very, very hard to notice. And these are very tricky thing about AI risk. Thank you. Amit?
Yeah, I just want to add that the customer experience point, it's kind of baked into using machine learning models because models always get some kind of error, some kind of false positive when you say someone is fraud and is not fraud, or you prevent someone from getting a loan. And these cases affect like real people, real customers, which are like the goal of your company is to help those customers. So making sure you know how to walk around those errors is really hard, and it's really important because we don't want to hurt our customers. B, enough that like 10 customers get like really bad experience and then start getting really bad reviews. So this is an angle that is really, I think, an important one. A lot of times people focus on like the target, the metric that the model tries to optimize, like loss, and usually it's okay because it's aggregated over a lot of users. But the individual cases is where things get really broken down. And another side, I think, is model deterioration over time. Models tend to be trained not online, but from time to time, and as they go live, they start like the real world starts to shift under them. So you get over time poorer results. And it's really important to have the right monitoring tools in place to identify those and make sure you have ways of retraining those models and making sure they're up to date.
Thank you. Raj?
Yeah, I think, I mean, with this esteemed panel, a lot of these questions, by the time you reach the last, or, you would have main points covered already. So I think the only thing I will add probably is like what we have seen is with machine learning models, like when you use like PII, right? So then you're just not focused on model risk per se. Then you have to make sure you're, collaborating with like your privacy risk individual, the record retention, related risks that come along with it, and the compliance people. So there's a lot of like collaboration that's needed when you start to use consumer data. So just wanted to highlight that.
Steve?
Yeah, so I agree with the other panelists' the opinions. I think on a lot of risks related to model risk has been already mentioned, like transparency, fairness, robustness, and so on. Just want to add one point there, is to echo what Raj mentioned. I think some AI risks are not just limited to the model risk. So there are some other risks there. For example, the compliance legal risk, reputational risk, regulatory risk, third party risk. So some of them can be partially addressed in the model risk management, but some of them is a kind of integrated work or collaboration with many other groups or teams in the company. Yeah, and another thing I want to mention about the risk levels, I think it has already been mentioned briefly. So the AI or ML risk also relies on the model use. Their model risk levels can be quite different. Usually the client customer facing model use has a higher risk than the others. It has a higher requirement on transparency. In this way, for example, the white box interpretable machine learning method is preferred to the black box, the machine learning algorithms. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel like I'm seeing a lot of kind of commonalities amongst the things you're mentioning, as well as different categories of risks. I've seen people mention risks around, I would say what we might call like operational risks, like model performance going down, hurting user experience. And then you mentioned the compliance and regulation risks. And then Ozga, you mentioned some bad actors, so there are probably also security risks involved as well. So it sounds like these are all the types of different categories of risks that we must be combating. I want to get back to kind of the regulation later, and maybe start out with these kind of operational risks. So I have a question for Amit, Elliott, and Ozga. So you mentioned, I think there were two things that were kind of commonly mentioned here. One is business metrics and user experience. So it sounds like when you're building these models, what you are trying to make sure to consider is what are the business consequences, or what are the consequences for your users, and what does the experience look like for that. And coming from a data science background, and for example, in Kaggle competitions, people always think about accuracy, AUC, false positive rate, and how to bring that 0.1% higher, right? And I feel like there is some kind of gap to fill between thinking about business outcomes and user outcomes and these model performance metrics that you might learn in college. So I'm curious to hear the types of kind of framework or organization structure or practices that you've built inside your company in order to address this gap. Amit, do you want to go first?
Sure. So yeah, great question. I think that it's really important to make sure that all the relevant stakeholders are involved from day one when you start designing the algorithm. And it's not enough just for data science to sit with risk, because then you might focus only on the loss side. You need to make sure there's people from product or business development there as well, making sure that we know what's the trade-offs there. Because we can prevent loss, but not like lending to anyone and then we get zero loss. That's not the goal here. But I think that for me, it is part of the data science education, because we always deal with trade-offs in data science. We always deal with trade-offs between accuracy and coverage, for instance. And I think this can be translated into risk versus user experience kind of trade-offs. So I think we have this in our mindset because we are aware of trade-off. We will never give you a binary answer for our models. We give you a score, and then this score can be translated using some kind of strategy there into the different actions. So I think that we are aware of this, and it's important to bring in the stakeholders as early as possible, not as an afterthought, but during all the design and implementation process.
And when you say stakeholders, are you referring to people from risk or business stakeholders?
Yeah, definitely. So that usually risk, if it's fraud or credit, and then someone from the product side, for instance, that are more related to the user experience, and they know what's the pitfalls there. So making sure you have not just one-sided decision making, but people from different parts of the organization participating in this process.
Makes sense. Thank you. Elliott?
Yeah, I think to echo a little bit of what Amit said and take it even further, I would say almost without exception, the impact of an ML model is almost never gated on the ML model's performance when it interacts with your product experience. And there's a lot of things that go into this, but fundamentally it's because most of your model builders are very highly motivated to squeeze out the last drops of goodness out of every ML model that they're building. Whereas most of the folks who are working on product experience or who are designing sort of user experience are focused on as many things as they can. Them going from something that is 95% effective to 99% effective is generally not a good use of their time, because they could go somewhere else where something is 20% effective and take it to 60% effective with the same resources. And so from my experience, and I think the experience of many other folks here, you're almost never rate limited on how good your model is, unless it's truly an unmodelable space. What you are rate limited in terms of impact is how well that pairs up with a product experience. You can take the best ML model in the world at predicting a problem, something with a 0.995 AUC, and if you pair it with a crappy product experience, good luck, you're done. Alternatively, you can take a model that's kind of middling, and if you pair it with a decent product experience, you're going to see pretty serious gains from that, especially expressed at scale. And so a lot of folks say, like, well, I'm just here to make the model better. And the answer is, yeah, we kind of anticipate everybody's going to do that. We've all done Kaggle competitions. We're all highly motivated by those performance metrics. But if you're thinking about where best to spend the time, getting better product model fit is going to win 10 days out of 10 when it comes to improving model impact.
Interesting. Thank you. And Ozge?
In our case, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said, and to add on top of it, what we've been working on in the last 2 years is I truly believe in standardization as much as we can, right? Yes, every use case is unique, every use case is different, but if we're able to give the data scientists the same tools and processes that they can use for every use case that they're building, then we're creating some consistency and standardization, and we have the right expectation as an outcome, right? And as part of that whole process, we have started an AI enablement program, which turned into an AI governance program in the last few months. And what we're doing, we take the whole data lifecycle, data science lifecycle. This typical circle, right? Starting from the discovery, development, deployment, decommissioning, and it always starts with business understanding and data understanding, data prep, modeling, evaluation, deployment, monitoring, and decommissioning. So we fully look at this data science lifecycle, and we actually have created the right tools and processes, and we mapped each of our artifacts within our AI governance program into each pillars of this data science lifecycle. So every data scientist within my team is now expected to fill in and all of those artifacts, which includes a business opportunity assessment. Why are we doing this? And business opportunity assessment has to be filled in with the business. We don't do it ourselves. They have to be at the table. They have to be telling us the value and why we're doing it. AI value calculator, we calculate the value of each use case that we work on. We have data ethics assessment. We have algorithm impact calculator. We have an algorithm fact sheet. And there are a couple more artifacts that we're currently working on. But I truly believe if we are able to standardize the whole process, then we can expect a consistency from our data scientists. And there are no rooms for questions, I guess.
No, thank you. I think standardization is a very important keyword. And actually, I'm also hosting another panel later today on scale, where we have speakers from companies like Expedia and SurveyMonkey and others. And they also have literally hundreds of models, and they have hundreds, thousands of data scientists. Some are interns, some are PhDs. And when you have different types of people, there is an obvious question that of how do we make sure that everyone is following what you want them to follow? And I think your point about standardization and the actual practices that you've done is very insightful. So thank you for that perspective. So I think there was a mention of kind of impact scoring and value scoring, and also Amit, you also mentioned working with different stakeholders and the trade-off of risk and UX. So I want to kind of turn this over to more on the risk side and get a perspective from Raj and G on from in the financial services. We've been hearing about keywords like model risk management and model governance for quite some time, I'd say. But I'd love to kind of hear from you on what you think about these trade-offs and how you think about standardization of, let's say, model risk evaluation across your organization. And what kind of things have you implemented so far and are planning to implement in the future when it comes to these strategies? Raj, do you want to go first?
Sure. So, great question. From a financial institution standpoint, so we have had ESET 11.7 for over a decade, which is the supervisory guidance on model risk management. Though principle of model risk management has been around a lot, before that. We have had our model risk management procedures and policy, which is how we standardize the expectations for all our model developers across the organization. For machine learning specifically, we call out the main pitfalls that are associated with machine learning, so that our developers, they are aware that these are the challenges that we need to keep in mind, and as we develop our models, that we are mitigating these challenges or thinking about these. We also share our validation work program. Like, this is how you're going to be evaluated. So it's very transparent to them. When it comes for an independent review, this is what you would be evaluated on. So if you miss on something, you're going to get dinged, and you'll be asked to go and fix that. So this is how we do it at Northern Trust. The idea of standardization, I really like that. We do it through our procedures, but individual teams are welcome to have their own, ways to standardize. I think the challenge is sometimes is that there are silos. It's not necessarily like within an organization that you have like two teams only working on machine learning models. You can have them sitting in areas which you have to actually go and identify where that is happening. So the idea is to make sure that there is an awareness about the program, there's awareness about the standards, and that then making sure people are compliant by those.
Thank you. Do you want to go next?
Yeah, so I agree with Raj. And for the model risk management, the practice, I think after SR11 and most the banking the companies have already established the procedure or the process for the model risk management. And for Wells Fargo, we also have like very comprehensive the policy and the model lifecycle procedure to cover all the model identification, the risk strengths, the model development, validation, monitoring, implementation, all the process. And also for different model types, we have different model development template and a model validation template to provide guidance on what type of tasks need to pay attention to and what's the procedure along all the model development and validation, the process there. So I think that this is the foundation for the model risk management to have a sound the procedure. And especially for AI ML, the risks, we have the supplemental guidance to our validation and development on the template. So besides the procedure and the process, I think it's also very important for the company, also like I'm from the model risk management team, to improve the efficiency of the validation work. So for us, we do create the standard the libraries and the validators. They have the standard workflow template, like in the Python notebooks, like to work on the pipelines, end-to-end pipelines. And also we have like in our validation team, we also have a research team to develop cutting edge methodologies, not just about like new algorithms, it's also to for capture the new AI risks there. For example, like robustness, the weakness spot tests, and so on. Yeah, so I think it's not beside both a good with sound process plus the effective the risk management the tools and the platforms can also be very helpful. Yeah.
Interesting. No, thank you for sharing that. That's what's interesting to me is that I think both Ozge and Raj, they all mentioned standardization and creating template and frameworks, and it sounds like different parties in these organizations are thinking about very similar things of how do we standardize, how do we trade off risk and business outcomes, which leads me to think, who's ultimately responsible when something weird happens? Who should get the blame? So, Oz, I have a question for you. You've been working with many different financial institutions with many different structures, and you've probably been advising them on how to create the best kind of risk management framework. I'd love to hear, is it the data scientists, business, legal, or risk teams who are ultimately responsible for these risks?
Yeah, honestly, everyone involved in the process, to be quite frank. So if you think about the three lines of defense model that a typical banking or a financial services institution will have, we always say that the risk is owned by the first line, and that's your your business, that's your data scientist that sits in the business, and that is your whether your technology organization, your HR organization, whatever the solution that the model or ML or AI model may be trying to solve. It's the responsibility of the business to really understand what the risk is, own that risk, and be the first line of defense, no pun intended, to mitigate or defend against that risk. But that doesn't really relieve the second line or third line from their responsibilities, right? The second line, as the kind of the independent risk function, has to provide that oversight and guidance to first line to understand what type of risk to look for, where to look for those risks, what are the regulatory expectations, and that oversight and guidance has to come from the second line. And then takes that one step further, then you insert the third line, internal audit potentially in there as well, to really play that independent function of coming in and testing and stress testing the models a little bit, if you will, to really see if you were to push a little, is it going to break, right? Try to play the role of that bad actor that we've been talking about, and stressing the model to see what kind of reaction the model is going to give to that stress. And I think if you take that as a whole, your risk management framework has the first line as your owner, second line providing that oversight and guidance, and third line, the internal audit really coming in and trying to break the model and test the model, right? So, and obviously, we've seen organizations even within first line develop certain testing or oversight risk functions that may come in before second line comes in. We've seen second line functions doing their own testing as well. So you can absolutely take that and improve upon it. But at the bare minimum, that 3 lines of defense model, I think I would highly advise and continue to advise my clients to ensure that risk is owned across the board by everyone involved in that life cycle of an ML or AI model.
Interesting. And this 3 lines of defense, who's responsible for creating this structure and maintaining this? If Oz, you're there, that's great, but not everyone can hire Deloitte consultants. So who's responsible in the company to create this structure?
Yeah, I think that comes from the executive management team, right? So it's a very, very common framework that we see in financial services organizations. How do you really split the responsibilities that the business has from developing the product and serving the customer to then mitigating against the risks that may be associated with the product and the services that you're providing as well. So every institution has this 3 lines of defense model. Whether you call it a 3 lines of defense model or not, that's a whole another story, right? But every business has someone who's developing the product. Every business has someone who's thinking with that kind of the risk mindset and trying to understand where the risks may come from and how to mitigate against those risks. And a lot of public institutions, it's a requirement these days to have that internal audit function that comes in and provides that independent testing as well.
And it might be, just to add on it, and Oz, correct me if I'm wrong, you probably have better understanding on this, but depends on if they are regulated or not, right?
Oh.
Like in Canada, we have OSFI that we have to report to and answer to, and it's not optional. Like we have to have these groups within our bank. So it's much of it is also regulatory pressure. But if we're talking about any fintechs or any other little startups, maybe who are not actually answering to OSFI yet, yes, they might not be thinking about these kind of 3 line of defenses at this point.
Fair.
Interesting. This 3 line of defense concept is clearly kind of common in risk management, but probably for a lot of people in the data science audience, right? This is something new. I haven't heard of it. What is that, right? So how have you seen, and I'm curious to hear from others too, have you seen any kind of knowledge gaps from kind of, when we're trying to build this model risk management processes, gaps between the data science community and the risk community when it comes to how to adopt these types of risk management frameworks and in these organizations? If Oz has thoughts, love to hear. If others have thoughts, I'd love to hear from your organization's perspective as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in, but I'm sure others have organizations, and it's a very common challenge, right? As a data scientist, the last thing that you want to worry about, or last thing that you in the top of your mind, is how you're going to manage risk. You're trying to think about the model, develop the model, make sure the model works properly, right? The risk management is probably the last thing in your mind. So that gap exists today in every organization. I don't think any organization can raise their hand today and say, "Oh, our data scientists are great risk management individuals, or they understand what risk management is." So I think the tone from the top becomes very important, right? That it's setting that stage and providing at a very high level of why it is important to manage the risk associated with these models, and what the outcome could be if the risk is not managed properly, for the data science and the brains behind these models, right? To really understand, oh, I could really hurt the reputation of my firm here, or I could really do something that's going to damage our customers. And that becomes very important to have that understanding. And I think the tone from the top and the messaging from the top becomes critical in making that shift between a data scientist to a potentially someone who thinks about risk management. I'm sure others have other additional thoughts as well.
I can maybe
go ahead.
follow up on that, actually. So one of the things that we've seen is there's a super different way in which how folks at the extreme one end of sort of compliance and risk, no knock to them, but lawyers in the room, versus data scientists and model builders will address things. If you're a data scientist and you go to a lawyer and you say, "Hey, like, can I do this? Is this legal?" Any decent lawyer is going to be like, "Well, it depends." And they're dealing with a lot of existential challenges around, like, well, compliance and regulatory frameworks are difficult to navigate. It depends on administrations. It depends on local things. It depends on political sentiment. And if you're a data scientist or even an engineer working on something, that kind of existential level of question, you get enough of that when it comes to programming abstraction and model architecture. You don't want any more of it. And so one of the things that we've seen is we'll get a lot of like person asking question that should have a yes or no answer on the data science side. And person in compliance and risk will give a 5-paragraph answer that doesn't say yes or no. And then similarly, person on the compliance side will ask an open-ended general question designed to be answered sort of shortly and effectively. And a data scientist will say, like, well, let me give you 10 pages of technical documentation and talk to you about some theses and white papers that I read. And so there's a lot of talking back and forth that happens. And sometimes one of the best ways to connect those two is to basically say, congratulations, you don't get to talk the way you want to. You have to talk in the way that the other party wants. So if you're a legal and compliance team, you can't say, let's go on ad nauseum about existential risk compliance. You have to put together a spreadsheet of the 500 features that are thumbs up to use under any circumstances and the 500 that are thumbs down to not use any circumstances. That's really hard for you to do, but that's what the other side needs. If you're a data scientist, you don't get to talk about the technical implementation architecture. You have to immediately go to, okay, here's the letter of what risk and compliance are asking for. What other things are necessary here? Explain it like they're 5 kind of approach. And if you get that element of, hey, you have to talk the way your partners want you to talk, and you get it sort of bi-directionally, you start to cross-train in that skill set. I have data scientists on my team who are like actually going through them. They're like, hey, I've heard a lot about all these regulations. I should probably read them so that I'm a little familiar. And then they start asking better questions. You get lawyers who sit here and say like, well, I know I was supposed to ask a question about cat boost versus random forest, but like, I should probably know what those mean before I start asking that question. And you start to see better questions getting asked the more folks cross-train, and it avoids a whole lot of the conflicts or challenges that can come up.
This is a fantastic point, and I feel like we are just starting this interesting discussion, but unfortunately we're very close to time, so we have about 3 minutes left. But with the remaining time, maybe let's quickly go through all the panelists again, and if you can all share like a short 2-3 sentences advice for the entire audience on how to install integrity and ML models in the financial industry. Let's start with you.
Yeah, so I think it's very important to establish the effective AI risk framework and the process. For example, from the identification of the AI risks, what it means, and what the risks are included. And then for different type of risks, identify or assess and evaluate them through certain metrics, not necessarily performance metrics, but some metrics for the risks and people are focusing on. And then define the management and the control process, and then keep ongoing monitoring. And also change management is very important. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have something on similar lines. No matter whether you have 3 lines of defense structure or not, make sure that you identify someone qualified who can actually look at your piece of work, provide you credible challenge, and take the challenge seriously, and see what further can be improved before you take your model into production.
Okay.
And I think one of the major things is make sure there's awareness to those kinds of risks, and make sure that the data science teams knows about those risks, and they are aware of this from day one, from the day they start designing their solutions.
Yeah, just like Amit said, it's not about you put out the best model with the best possible performance. If it has deficiencies in areas that aren't measured by performance, it's not the best model.
Given my role, I'm probably going to take it to more of a governance side on this thing. But I would say establish a proper governance framework, governance structure, that everyone is clear on their roles and responsibilities and how to escalate risks and issues, and who is going to be responsible for resolving for those risks and issues before the model is put to use and start interfacing with the customer.
Okay.
I agree with Oz, and on top of it, what I also remind my team, I want to also stay away from the risk lens only. So we don't even really use the risk, to be honest, within our organization, in our lingo. It's more about, within our data scientists, it's more about doing the right thing for our stakeholders. And our stakeholders are our customers, shareholders, business partners, and everyone. And to be able to do the right thing, we have to have the right, again, I'll go back to the process that was in place. But first, we need to identify what are the ML integrity requirements, right? First, we need to identify what that means for our organization. As an example, we're talking about reliability requirements, fairness, explainability, privacy, and security requirements. And then operationalization. If we're not able to operationalize any of these requirements, then it's a failure in the end. And to be able to operationalize these properly, we rely on the MLOps framework, and we try to do everything on the MLOps framework structure. And even though we do have silos within our companies, any large company will have the silo. But as long as we're providing the best practices, it's really up to everyone to either follow the same path or a similar path, but still looking like the same structure. So identification and then operationalization are really key in my perspective.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining the panel. I think it was a very rare occasion to have data science leaders as well as risk leaders talking about very interesting topics on ML integrity and AI risk from different perspectives. So thank you so much, everyone, and thank you for providing us diverse perspectives.